And live.
Boo. Ho, 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 everybody. Welcome to your non-denominational Christmas edition. That's not right, is it?
It's non-denominational holiday extravaganza.
That's the one. Trust our Mexican friends from the south to pop along and correct us by peeking over that wonderful wall. Welcome, everyone, to Failcast F1. I hope you've all had a grand Christmas. My name is Mr. Bolkenberg, and alongside me, as always, is our taco friend extraordinaire, Mr. Definitely Zero. How you doing?
Feliz Navidad. I am good. I'm good. I'm double beveraging because it's the festive season.
Yes.
I have a Red Bull Cola and I have an Eastbjorn, which is brewed in the Arctic. It is from the northernmost brewery in the world.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to do a bit of drink driving at some point.
I hope you're having that chilled.
It is. It is very, very cold. It's been in my fridge for months, so it should be.
Superb. I'm just going to crack open a tinny. There we go.
Bonza, mate.
Bonza.
Fine. I'll crack open as well.
Cheers to
It's
you,
a home
mate.
Grand Prix. Cheers to you.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'd forgotten where we were going next, actually. It completely passed me by. So, and I'm not great at Silverstone.
No, me neither. Me neither. Although, I have to say, in this version of the game, I'm a lot better than I was. But have you noticed, I don't know if it was just my setup or not, but at Maggots and Beckett's, it's quite easy for me to fly off the track completely.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree.
Like the
and that
back
wasn't
end lifts
before.
up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Because I used to be able to, in previous games, I think where it may have had more grip or something, you'd be able to proper fly in and do 7th gear, 6th gear and be comfortable. But now I don't feel like that at all.
No. And in my career mode playthrough, I wrote the car off in all 3 practice sessions.
Uh-oh.
Because I just thought, well, maybe it's the line, right? Because, like, famously, it's possible to take those corners flat. And
Yep.
it was all Button was talking about after the formula change. But no, apparently in this game, not.
Dang it. Okay.
So, shall we dive into some qualifying?
Yes, let's dive in indeed. Getting a couple of people joining on the old chat, so do feel free to pop in and say hello. The chat will speak at us as we go, especially if you've got any questions, because as it's Christmas, it's been a little bit of a slow week in the old F1 news, and the festivities that we did have planned, we've had to shift due to personal reasons, mainly involving my drunken father having accidents. So, balance time.
Oh yeah, you're good. You're good that you're bringing that up. I mean, not about the drunken dad thing. More that the holiday extravaganza isn't quite as extravaganzerous. That is now a word. I don't know if it was previously, but
It is now.
it sounds right. It feels right. I'm going with it. So basically, we'll be doing what amounts to a regular episode. We might tack a little something on the end, depending on how we are for time, and we will reschedule with you guys. And what was a non-denominational holiday extravaganza will become a non-denominational non-holiday extravaganza sometime in the new year.
Which, to be fair, I think befits us maybe even better than what we originally planned.
We've even failed at Christmas. May cause anal leakage.
Always a problem.
Yeah. Right. Let me load this setup, the one that almost kills me every time, and we can get into a little bit of F1 news, and not that there is a great deal. Righty ho. Let's go to the track. So, the hot news topic isn't particularly F1 related, really, except that it involves a driver. Lewis Hamilton's found himself in trouble, naughty boy.
Yes.
Because of social media comments.
Social justice warriors.
Yeah, he got SJW, didn't he? For telling his nephew that boys don't wear dresses. I I'm scared to touch this one, to be honest.
I feel like we're in hot water whatever we do.
Yeah.
And I've
mean,
seen both sides of the argument plastered all over my Facebook. And my general comments of it kind of are if that's his opinion, then he's okay to air his own opinion. Whether or not you agree with it or disagree with it is your own opinion to do so. But there's much more important things out there in the world to be jumping up and down and having a general pissy hissy fit over than him joking about boys don't wear dresses.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. Problem is like, I'm from a traditional working class northern family, right? We're fairly open-minded. It's not like, redneck country or anything. Yeah. But what I do remember, and I'm going to embarrass my cousin here, but it's okay because no one knows who he is. I have a cousin who's quite a bit younger than me. And he's also a little bit younger than my younger sister. And when he was small, one of his favourite things to do, and we're talking really small here, was to... she had a Barbie playset that was based around horse riding. And his favourite thing to wear was a pink, like a proper bright pink horse riding... jacket with a belt, and I don't know why, but he was just obsessed with it. Like he loved it, and his mother, my auntie, used to hide it because she didn't like him wearing it, and he always used to find it. So you'd be having a cup of tea or whatever on the couch, and he'd wander in, like he'd just be wearing it. He was too young to speak, and she was always saying, "Get that thing off him." So. Like not too long ago, this wasn't necessarily a radical opinion that Lewis was expressing. Really, yeah. It was an opinion held by most people for whatever reason, and we're a little bit more open-minded and tolerant today.
Yeah.
I think most people are a little bit more open-minded about this kind of stuff, and that's cool. That's totally fine. But if some people aren't quite ready to take that journey with you, I don't think it. Because a lot of people were saying, like, well, he's abusing his nephew, and it's like, well, is he really? I mean, like fitting in society is, you don't have carte blanche to tell people what you are and have them always be okay with that, right? Every school has bullies and nerds and kids who get pushed around for things like having red hair or being from a single parent family and stuff. Mm-hmm. It seems a very odd cause to champion when you're ignoring all the other reasons kids get bullied. So to me, it was... I can understand why it might have upset some people, but at the same time, it does sort of feel... The car... I don't know if you were on board with me there, but that was pretty colourful, and my lap is ruined. Yeah, I can't carry speed in this car with this setup. It just does not work. Anyway, we'll hop off that hot topic immediately, having now acknowledged it and covered it, and saying we don't... Oh, please.
I was going to say, as a kind of main segue, though, is that... So this, for me, is the first time where we've had, in a Liberty Media environment, an F1 driver where it's all about let's all be social, let's all be on our phones, let's Instagram our way and Snapchat our way through a press conference because we're down with the kids in it. I wonder what Liberty Media then will do as a reactionary off the back of that, because when you look... Oh, Christ, that's not how Cops is taken. When you look at... how they deal with their social media in general and how they engage with their fans, they seem to have like this comment section where Liberty Media are gods and they can do no wrong, and everyone thumbs up that comment and so on and so forth. You've got the Kimi Raikkonen pretend accounts going blah and all of that. But this is the first time where like they've had a bit of hot water on their hands because someone has been let loose and said something. And I wonder what they then do around how they not control necessarily, but what guidelines they put in place because of how it then affects on the F1 as a brand and all of that kind of stuff. Because they've been allowed to be quite wildly dynamic up till now. And all it takes is for a few people to be grossly offended for no particular reason. And then I wonder how much that changes.
Well, that's a good point, actually. It did occur to me as well. This is the first time a Formula One driver has... I mean, and F1 seems to be where the SJW types are going now. And I do kind of dislike that term a little bit because it carries a certain connotation. But it's also accurate, unfortunately. Because, we've just had this big issue about grid girls. That's the hot topic at the moment. The BBC did a podcast on it. And, I mean, for me, it's a thorny issue, not necessarily because I want to see grid girls retained, but it's been quite rightly pointed out that you're voting on taking away work from models and women who do this professionally.
Yeah.
And the argument is, well, if they want the work, what's the harm? And that is a legitimate argument. I think that has a place in the debate.
Absolutely.
The other thing, of course, is someone suggested, well, why don't we have a mix of grid girls and grid boys? And I'd be fine with that. Sebastian Vettel voiced his opinion that he would not be fine with that. What was it he said? I wouldn't want to pull up on the grid in Monaco and be presented with a man's bottom, I think is what he said. But, Sebastian, that's just like his opinion, man. So I don't know, but it does seem like F1's starting to come under a lot of scrutiny. I mean, to be honest, this kind of stuff is getting everywhere, right? I mean, it's even got into card games, comic books, tabletop gaming, like all the traditionally male interest pursuits. Are getting a lot of attention like this now, and it doesn't help with something we didn't cover a few weeks back, but actually it's a perfect segue. The FIA appointing Carmen Jorda as their women's representative.
The most talentless female driver out there currently, but she's got blonde hair and big boobs.
Yeah, well, she attracted a lot of complaints from a lot of female racing drivers, actually. Partly because she's got the unpopular opinion that women can't compete in Formula One.
Yep.
And so there needs to be a women's only F1 World Championship.
Yep.
Which almost every other female racing driver has come out against. And I would agree with them, because I think there are drivers out there. My go-to is always Simona Di Silvestro, who I really wanted to see in Formula One, but she just didn't catch her break for any reason. But I rate her so highly. Yeah.
She's been doing not too badly in the old V8 supercars, which are beasts to throw around. I mean, she's at the back of the field, but she's on the pace, not trailing it by 12 seconds like Carmen was.
No, but also she's a single-seater specialist. She's a fish out of water there. I mean, it's just like how Juan Pablo Montoya didn't exactly do so well driving NASCARs initially. And same with, what's his name? Crashed the Renault and went to drive pickup trucks. Nelson Piquet Jr.
Oh, yes.
That's the one.
What a great career summary.
Yeah. But he drove NASCAR trucks, didn't he? And
he did.
didn't do so sexy. Right, let me see how much you're beating me by.
Not by much. It's close.
Not by a huge amount, but I have thrown it off the circuit completely on 2 of my 3 laps.
I was
properly. I'm surprised I'm still here talking to you, and you're not having to contact me via a seance.
Is there any tacos out there?
Let me see. I think we're safe, but I sort of feel like I should be out on circuit.
I'll get some footage of you whilst you're out and about. Because, funny enough, where you're talking about Carmen Jorda, I'm a big fan of... now her name's Pippa. Pippa. What's her name?
Oh,
What's
I
her
know who
surname?
you mean.
She's British. She always comes out and races in pink.
Pippa Mann, is it?
That's it. It's because I kept on in my head. I was going Pippa Woman, and I was like, that's not a proper name. Pippa Lady. I was then thinking. I was like, oh, panic on the podcast. Yeah. So Pippa Mann, I rate quite highly because she goes out and does IndyCar, and she was very, very competitive in Indy Lights and things like that, and kart before it kind of all went more like overly based. She's not great as ovals, but that seems to be where she gets all of her charity to race for cancer research and stuff like that for now. And she basically put out a Twitter thing to the FIA saying, I'm disgusted with your proposition. If you'd like to contact a competitive female racer who believes that women can actually race equally with men in a machine and man-based sport, give me a call. And I was like, yes girl, yes girl. I wanted to put on like every GIF possible of like black women just go underneath, because I was like, yeah, feeling that, because there are examples of it everywhere. But I guess my problem with Carmen is twofold. So you have, she's probably one of the least competitive female racers that I can remember in years. And having seen her in action with my own eyes round Silverstone, and she was struggling to keep the thing on the track, and like the rest of GP3 all came round on like lap 2, and she was already about 10 seconds off the back of second last. It was horrible. And my partner I was with at the time was like, "Who's that idiot at the back?" I was like, "Oh, I could do better than that." I was like, "I think we could." So yeah, you've got that, but she channels the whole. It's not her problem that she's very good looking, but those two things combined make you go, you've been chosen for what you can get out of publicity and photos, not necessarily the messages that you bring, and that's where I have an issue with that in general. And I think if you can align a message and good looks, then that's great, or a message and bad looks, then that's fine. It shouldn't be the looks that become the deciding factor. But then sex sells, and F1 knows that, and I don't see that.
Yeah, this is the problem I'm having. The back just goes out on me, you know.
Buckaroo.
And that was a horrible line through those corners. I would agree with you there. But also, I mean, before we go too far down that road, I should add that the same thing is actually applied to male drivers as well, because
Absolutely.
you don't see the ugly ones advertising Calvin Klein's.
Nope.
So
could you see Daniel Kvyat in black and white on the front page of like GQ magazine?
No.
Paco Rabanne, my Russian oil.
Yeah, exactly. You just I wouldn't expect to see old travel face on the front of any magazines, but but you know, it's just a sort of footnote to point out that, you know, male drivers are also judged on their looks quite a bit. In like, particularly Lewis, right? I mean, he's a handsome man. He's quite well dressed, and that gets him all the work.
And he's always having a shower at Tottenham Hale Station because he's been up there for a year, and it's really annoying me.
Well, I mean, that's the reason he's front and centre for Mercedes, right? Because you don't see Bottas. Bottas. You don't see Bottas being in all the commercials wearing the suit outside Monaco, right? When Nico Rosberg was his teammate, then the duties were split fairly evenly because Nico is also a fucking hell.
Ooh, have you still got wheels?
Yeah, I do still have wheels.
Praise Jesus! It's a miracle, Christmas miracle.
Well, the only reason I still have wheels is that I hit the barrier with both wheels at the same time. If you hit one wheel and not the other, then you lose it. That seems to be the extent of the physics. Disappointing, Mr. Greco. But yeah, I mean, I get your point. I mean, I presume as well she's well backed with a lot of sponsorship money.
I assume so, because she's definitely not won any prize money to get anywhere with anything.
No. So I don't know, but Susie Wolff said the same thing, really, that she said the appointment is a bit of a travesty, and I'm sure you and I would agree with that, because there are such better representatives of women in motorsport. than someone who cannot race. And someone, I mean, because let's be honest, it's very easy for her to say women can't compete in Formula One because she is quite possibly the worst female racer out there. So if any woman was going to make it to Formula One, it would not be her.
Yep.
I mean, I'm always surprised, to be honest with you, that Danica Patrick didn't turn up at some point.
No, especially now that she's called her retirement over at NASCAR, which I do feel like that was a career move that went on too long and didn't work, because I didn't realise just how well she did in IndyCar before she transitioned over to NASCAR and then faded into crying obscurity. So yeah, it does feel a bit wonky and all over the shop. So Simona de Silvestri would be another one I'd obviously agree with you on. Pippa Mann done very well. There's a couple that are running around in the junior categories that are quite interesting as well. Tatiana Calderon, when she actually puts it together, is relatively quick.
That was the name I was thinking of. I knew Calderon, but I didn't know her first name.
She disappointed this year, but previously she was kind of relative midfielder in Formula 3, which was where Verstappen and Ocon and co came from.
I mean, like, obviously we're not quite at a level yet where I don't think we ever will be, to be honest, where you have totally equal representation, just because of a general tendency to like different things.
Yeah.
But the fact that just off the top of our heads we can name 4 who are not just a tiny bit better than Carmen Jorda, but are infinitely better than Carmen Jorda, I think says a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting appointment. You and I are about a tenth and change apart. I could have gone faster, but every time I tried, I just threw it off the track.
That car looks evil, dude. It looks evil.
Yeah, there's something wrong with my
got
setup.
a grid penalty. How did he manage that?
Did he block someone?
Must have done. Race director.
I went on board with him briefly, and
he collided with Ericsson.
Oh. Okay, well, it's nice to know it's not just me having a rough day.
Yeah. Stupid stuff.
And so far, we're ahead of both Mercedes, which is an encouraging start. Yeah, I might try and get through on the harder compound.
I think there's enough of a gap to try it, actually.
Yeah. It worked out for me last time.
Yeah.
I forget how bad tyre wear is at this track, actually. It's not so bad, is it?
I can't remember.
Oh, well, professional.
Absolutely.
Professional of both of us. Okay, moving on with news and such like. There's been quite a lot of statements coming out, people talking to the press, since there's not been a whole lot really going on. Should we talk Raikkonen first?
Yes.
Because Ferrari have released a pretty unequivocal statement, which praises Kimi Raikkonen as an incredible driver who's capable of incredible performances, while also simultaneously saying that if he doesn't produce those incredible performances next season, then he is fired. Very, very interesting to see them come out and say it before the season begins, but also it's a statement that I feel they should have made at the start of last year.
Yes.
And you and I have been calling his retirement for the last 2 years, and he's held on by his fingernails, because Ferrari are, as we have seen with Massa, as we saw with Berger and Alesi, actually, particularly Alesi got a lot of seasons at Ferrari before they decided they needed some fresh blood. So it does seem Ferrari kind of, once they're on a horse, they stick with it. But I think, because we know that statement was made because it is Raikkonen's last season. Like, I don't care. No matter how good he drives, he will be 39 the year after. He just know they're not going to keep him around. It's time. It's time now, Chief. And so we're in an interesting dilemma because Daniel Ricciardo's contract is open and available. Ferrari have had their eye on him for a few years. The rumour is that Vettel has a clause in his contract about not teaming with Daniel Ricciardo, specifically by name,
Interesting.
which seems odd. And then Ferrari have sort of handshake, wink and nod agreements over the last 3 years that they've made with Romain Grosjean and Sergio Perez. And then you've got Charles Leclerc and Antonio Giovinazzi. And it seems hard to know what they're going to do, because they've specifically said quite recently that they would go with a young driver next time, which is mold breaking for them. It's not something that they normally do. Usually they take drivers sort of 27, 28, 29 years old. And I want your hot take on it, because I mean, it seems odd to me that they would give just one season to Leclerc in a Sauber before shoehorning him into the Ferrari. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but what happens if he has a terrible season at Sauber? What happens if he's beaten by the Merrickson?
I think I think Plan A is Leclerc. He so far has been one of a kind for me in lower formulae, and the last time, everyone bangs on about what an amazing talent Verstappen was at that kind of level, but he didn't win. And Leclerc has mopped the floor with everyone at all times, and it's been amuse-bouche. So I think Plan A is Raikkonen out, Leclerc in. If Leclerc has a bad season, then they can call on Perez or Grosjean, depending on who is free and what's going on. Maybe that is the back scratch that Haas need to then put Giovinazzi in that car for 2019. To kind of move people out, because the problem for Antonio is that Leclerc has basically done him better a year later, and kind of outshone on different levels, because he's been so meteoric in his climb up the field. And so Giovinazzi definitely is F1 potential and F1 material. But the problem is that when you've got someone that is such a superstar, almost like how, not Kvyat-ish, but you would have, like Ricciardo is almost by media points been shoehorned to one side because everyone was too busy fapping over Verstappen. It reminds me a bit of that, where he's almost going to be like the forgotten person, a bit like our wonderful, excitable GP2 co-commentator.
For me, are you not concerned though a little bit that Ferrari seem to have an uncanny knack for killing interesting and exciting drivers?
Yes,
because you know, when I think of when I think of Charles Leclerc and how dynamic and exciting he's been, I mean, even Mercedes are giving Ocon time to get his eye in and mature. It would seem very un-Ferrari to move him into the mothership team after only one season. I mean, obviously, I agree that they've probably been influenced by what's happened with Verstappen. But by the same measure, I don't know if it's necessarily the environment for a young driver.
And I'd agree.
I mean, while Ferrari have always kind of overlooked some exciting talent and missed out on some great drivers by having this policy of only taking seasoned veterans, I think also it has its advantages, and I'm not sure Ferrari is the right corporate atmosphere for this. So, no, I mean, I don't know. I'm sceptical. And to be honest with you,
who would you put in then?
I'd put Perez in. I think put Perez in. I think Vettel will be out at some point, and then replace Vettel with Leclerc in a few years. I mean, once upon a time, I would have said, well, I think now. Wow, you kicked the crap out of me on your lap.
I'm just taking a look. I've not got there yet.
You're 8/10 up on me.
Be wary that it's going to rain in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, so I won't go out again then.
Okay, cool.
Well, I'm in sixth, but
Oh, you're well clear of the Force Indias and Renaults. By
yeah,
second, you'll be fine.
I hope so. Because seventh makes me nervous. Because the AI cheats as well.
Yes, it does.
I don't know. Maybe I should go out again.
I think you're okay.
Nervous. Yeah, I'm gonna go out again. Same tyres. It's gonna mess up my strategy a little bit, but whatever. This beer is really good. Yeah, I don't know. Part of me, like a little teeny part of my heart, would have liked to have seen it work out with a Haas to Ferrari transition for Grosjean, simply because I know how good he can be.
I think Haas has ruined him.
Yeah, when I look back at not his last year at Lotus, because the car was a shit heap, but like the two prior to that, I thought at times he was genuinely exciting. And knowing that, I remember, I think 2013 or 2014, there'll be a tweet from me somewhere that says, one day he will be a champion if he keeps driving like that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he didn't. And I said at the time, actually, him moving to Haas, in my mind, was a stupid idea, even though it was supposedly like a backdoor way into Ferrari. When he announced he was leaving, just ahead of the Renault buyout of Lotus, I was thinking, you stupid fucking idiot.
Because that was already kind of being rumoured, wasn't it, the Renault buyout? And you was kind of thinking, oh, well, Renault buyout, French driver. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a match made in heaven, right?
Yeah. No-brainer.
Renault have done all right out of it because they've got next season, I think, one of the best lineups on the grid.
Yeah. And Grosjean, actually, I was just having a quick, when we was doing our quick pre-run through, he's quoted yesterday as saying Renault and McLaren are going to leapfrog the midfield. And you're like, did you get on the wrong boat there, Mr. Grosjean? Because you're right, that lineup, Hulkenberg and Sainz, could be potentially very explosive.
Yeah, it could. Especially if Hulkenberg doesn't go off the boil, because we know he does occasionally, although generally his standard is stellar.
Yeah.
Yeah, track's wet.
Ooh, I'd come in as best as you can, because that's all tyre wear on your tyres, mate.
Yeah.
If that's good. No good.
Yeah, I'm coming in. But that means my lap is going to have to be fast enough to get me through.
And I think it will be now that it's pissing down, because Alonso is a second off of Massa and he's only just crossed the line, so it's already clearly getting slower.
Yes, it is, because I was a 10th off before I even got to the first corner. Yeah, so it's... I don't know, like the whole thing in general, I don't remember the last time I was so excited for a new season, particularly because I really do think... I'm going to caveat this statement because I still think McLaren should have stuck with Honda. I know people will be thinking, "Don't be ridiculous," but given how Honda improved over the course of the year, given the money that deal brought into McLaren, and given the fact that it was a works engine, and if they could get it to work, it would be a unique advantage to McLaren. Also, like, you forget that McLaren Aero was excellent, sure, but they also had input on how the Honda engine was scaled. Now they have to take a Renault engine that Renault has sole control over and make their aero work with it. And to me that seems a little bit iffy. And I've been reading Adrian Newey's book, How to Design a Car.
Ooh.
Which is excellent, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know if he wrote it himself. I can't find reference to a ghostwriter, but he's got a very funny and very personal way of like sharing anecdotes and stuff. But he describes in that book these sorts of dilemmas and stuff, and it sounds like it's a real pain in the aero department's arse to be changing engine gearbox even year over year. Like, consistency is key. And I think there's a lot of assumption that because I think people see it very much as well. The McLaren chassis was brilliant last season, which it was. Bang a Renault engine in it, and it's fine. But you can't just transplant a Renault engine into it. That's not how it works.
Sure.
So I don't know. I still think they're going to do very well, but I think the cost is going to outweigh the benefit long term. And I'm very concerned about having McLaren as a customer team. I don't think that sets a good precedent for the sport.
No.
That said, if they can get it to work, them messing around with Red Bull, I would very much like to see. And
Absolutely.
I think next season is one of the hardest to call in a while, actually. I think our pre-season predictions episode is going to be more difficult than usual because there's a lot more variables.
Which will make it more entertaining to go back and review when we see it at the end and realise just how terrible we may have been.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, at this point, I have no idea how the top 6 teams will be ordered. I've got a rough idea of who the top 6 teams will be, but could I place them in any particular order? No, not really. I mean, could Ferrari find something year on year that finally gives them that edge? Could Raikkonen suddenly switch back on? No. I mean, part of me predicts a Ferrari Drivers' Championship and a Mercedes Constructors.
Yeah, I can see what you said. Yeah,
but then 3rd, 4th, 5th. That's really hard to call because instinct would say Red Bull for 3rd, right? But they're now the least preferred Renault customer team on the grid. I'd be interested to see how that pans out over the year.
Yeah.
Then you've got, I mean, all 3 of those teams are Renault powered. One of them is the Renault Works team. You've got to say, and again, I know this got Toro Rosso into a lot of trouble, but you've got to say that Renault must have some serious temptation to delay upgrades, particularly given the competition.
Yeah, but so I was going to say, so there's a YouTube channel called F1 Interviews, and Sky F1 have been doing some half-hour interviews that have been kind of really in-depth, and one of them was with Zach Brown, and Natalie Pinkham was asking on this very specific topic, and she done the same thing to Adrian Newey. And Adrian Newey was very, very good at basically saying that one of the reasons why we've stuck with Renault through everything else, even if we have bitched about them, is that they've always given us exactly what they've been able to get. And so they would rather have parity on something that's slightly worse than be treated like a second-rate customer to someone that's slightly better, because then they'll know that they'll never be able to beat them. And I thought that was quite interesting from Newey to say that. And Zach Brown was talking about something quite similar in his things. But they're really good interviews if people want to see them. The YouTube channel is F1 Interviews.
Oh, Q3 is on Inters, and
Shit.
I can tell you, given how this car feels,
That could be problematical.
it could be, yeah, it could be, there could be issues.
What's the race? Let's have a look at what's the race. Oh shit, the race is wet. Ouch!
Yeah. Oh dear.
Problems. We should have looked at that. We never have wet races. Bollocks.
I'm gonna, I can tell you, I'm gonna be lucky to get points if it is wet, because this setup is slippery in the dry.
Yeah.
In the wet, I guess we'll find out, but I will not be putting in my best laps, I can tell you that much.
No, same. I think my car will be twerking it. But I
Still
guess
though,
that
this-
whole thing with the engine stuff brings us on to the other point I know you wanted to speak about, which was Honda and their external relations.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Autosport, just before we went live, we're making reference to a statement from outgoing Honda chief, Mr. Is it Yasugawa? I think.
Yeah.
Yasugawa-san, who was alluding to a backup plan for 2018. And what he was saying was that they have expanded their partner network, and this is like external contractors and consultants going into 2018, but he refused to name them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's particularly interesting because I think it's quite an open secret that Ross Brawn in particular, but the FIA in general, have been pushing Mercedes to provide technical and logistical support to Honda.
Yes.
To keep them in the sport. And I'm going to go ahead and say, Mercedes or AMG, I imagine, are probably the consultants. What would surprise me is if out of nowhere it was Mugen. Because I miss Mugen in Formula One. And they still do provide engines in Super Formula.
Yes, they do, don't they? I'd forgotten. Yeah.
So, and they're usually Honda's go-to. So I'd be interested if MTech Mugen had been consulted about what to do with next year's engine, but it is known, Khaleesi, that Mercedes in particular were under some pressure from the FIA to provide support, and Mercedes, for their part, seemingly seemed happy to do it. So that would be interesting. And this is actually, since it was announced that the FIA were trying to push Mercedes in this direction, there was quite a lot of people on Twitter suggesting, wouldn't it be hilarious if suddenly Honda find a lot of performance and Toro Rosso were beating McLaren?
Yeah.
I don't think hilarious is necessarily the right term. Not if you're Fernando Alonso.
No,
but you know what? If there's ever a moment for Honda to find a lot of pace, grim predictability tells me it's the minute they're not powering Fernando Alonso's car anymore.
Yeah.
For his part, Fernando Alonso described the start of this year as the most humiliating of his career, and basically beat Honda about the face and neck verbally in interview.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing that relationship was even more sour behind the scenes than it was in public. And I would be curious now to see how things pan out, but then we get into a whole new kettle of fish, right? That I see where the FIA are coming from, that we do want more engine suppliers in Formula One, but I mean, this basically makes Honda the horse of the engine suppliers, and I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Also, as well, I think it gets into a slightly grey area. So if Honda do make a massive improvement and say their engine becomes stronger than a Renault, and Renault don't make the gains, can Renault then say, right, well, we want those external contractors in as well because we've done it all ourselves and we've been left out in the cold, so we need now those performance gains as well, so we'll have a Mercedes contract in, thank you.
It's an interesting problem because you've set a precedent now.
Yeah.
And we all know, like particularly Red Bull and Christian Horner, they want a return to the end of the V8 era, basically, where the engines were all essentially even. They had different badges on them, they were produced in different factories, but there was a paper-thin difference between them.
Yeah. I don't mind differences between things. I don't want it to be quite such a gulf.
No, I mean, this is what the FIA was saying, right? Because they were being accused of trying to homologate the teams, basically. And this interference as well was seen as an attempt to homologate engines. And they had to release a statement after Ferrari complained, saying, well, no, we do want the engine to be a point of difference. We want chassis to be a point of difference. We want to make sure that that doesn't come at the price of no competition. But it's like, well, congratulations, Liberty. You're in the exact same situation that Bernie's been in
Yep.
for 3 decades and never found a solution for. So it's the unsolvable problem. It's the unsolvable problem because you can't have... If you have free competition, there will be inequality.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have free competition, then why not homologate everything?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, but I think, to be honest, F1 could do with some more Yamahas. I don't think it's bad to be the next Yamaha. I mean, it is if you're the one who is lumbered with that title, but essentially, I think in terms of the sport as a whole, you need to allow people to come in, spend money, and fail because that's the way the sport has always been.
Yeah.
What position are you?
I am currently in pole.
Oh, you rascal.
It was a great lap, but I've not been able to replicate it in any way, shape or form. I got in the zone. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's always to some extent a bit of a revolving door because of the nature. It's just the nature of business, isn't it? The way how things kind of play out like that. But yeah, it's because I know we've spoke about this before with Liberty and the way how they're like, oh well, things in IndyCar and NASCAR, they're very similar, but they're not the same. And I don't want it to go quite that way. I still want it to be like actual, real, proper differences. But I guess maybe the parameters for things. What am I trying to say? I think there needs to be some kind of hierarchy in what they think should be the sexiest things that are the differentiators. Because obviously the driver will be top. Then it will be, do you want it to be the engine that's the biggest differentiator between a car, or do you want it to be aerodynamics? And you kind of go down the sexy scale of what is supposed to be the things that differentiate a team and a car apart so that people can then make that choice of being informed, of saying, I'm going to support this team, I'm going to make this the difference, and this is how it affects the racing and so on. And one of the most interesting things, again, harking back to these long interviews, one was with Ross Brawn, with Martin Brundle, and Martin Brundle's sitting there. I know you're a Brundle lover, lol.
I am. Love a bit of the Brundles.
He was sitting there looking incredibly like angry and upset at the world, and he's just sitting there saying things like, "So what about engine parity then? And what about the tyres? And what about all these stupid grid penalties?" And it was
he hates the grid penalties.
Oh yeah.
There's all Brundles.
And actually, what was really, really interesting was how Ross Brawn kind of tackled that. But one of the things he was tackling was that he was saying it's the first time ever that they've put a grid of people together to work on racing for 2021, where people are going to openly submit data in so that they can understand what makes better racing in the future. And I think, because that's the first time they've ever done that. They've always just worked on assumptions and everyone's hidden behind the scenes. He's quite confident in this kind of way of openly sharing data in order to improve the show, because without the show there is no racing, that they'll be able to work on that. And I hope that some of the stuff about making racing closer and differentiation closer and things like that will kind of trickle out of some of that, because if you're all working collaboratively
Get out
together...
of my way, Verstappen. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's all right. I was watching it.
He's just ruined my lap by being a twat.
Stupid Rio. I was going to say stupid Yoss. Wrong one.
I was in a green lap and he just didn't move off the racing line.
You got
through Maggots and Beckett's. Anyway, sorry. Please do continue, because anything Ross Brawn has to say carries immense weight with me.
So yeah, he was just saying that because it's the first time that everyone is sharing data and prepared to work together to improve the show, and that they've got a committee that are working on actually what type of aerodynamics give good racing, therefore how does that translate to a circuit. Because Martin Brundle was talking about, I hear that you're talking about different circuits and the way how we should start changing the circuits, this, that and the other to fit Formula 1. And his reply was, no, we don't. We need to change Formula 1 to fit the circuits, because when you look at Formula 2, GP3, and all of these other different things that they go around, he says when you were in Abu Dhabi, you had people there was 60 overtakes in Formula 2 and however many in GP3, and then we had 12 in Formula 1. So we can't expect everyone to adapt to us all the time. We need to be able to kind of fit in the middle. It was really, really interesting, quite enlightening, and also quite comical to just have Sourpuss Brundle crying all the way through an interview. It was great.
Mean old man Brundle. He is like a Scooby-Doo villain. It's like, whenever I hear statistics like that, though, it annoys me a little bit, because there was a lot more overtakes in the junior formula, but also you've got more inexperienced drivers making mistakes. I mean, F1 has the best offensive and defensive drivers out there, but it's a lot easier to defend than it is to attack by nature. So
Yeah.
surely that's also a reflection of the fact that you have just much higher standards of driving
I know,
in Formula
agree.
1.
Agree. And also as well, I think you've got the oh, I think you've beat me. Hey!
No!
Nice.
Second again! God damn it! God damn it! Pole still evades me.
I didn't think anyone would go faster because Jeff said that the rain was now heavier, so I didn't go out. Silly me.
It was slippery.
Well done, mate. Well done.
Thank you. I wish it was on merit rather than circumstance, but I'll take it.
That was good.
Bugger though, my pole drought continues. Yeah, I mean, also, I hate when people complain about more overtaking, because then the FIA go down this route of DRS and KERS and all that kind of stuff, and then suddenly we get loads of overtaking, and people go, yeah, but it's not proper overtaking. And it's like, well, what the fucking hell do you want?
Yep, exactly. And so one of Brundle's questions to Ross Brawn in this interview was, overtaking was reduced by 60% in 2017. And Ross Brawn came back with our old age thing. It was almost like he was channeling our brains, and I did cheer when he said it. He went, yeah, but what is the value of a better overtake? I was like, yes, Ross. Because he said it's not, when you look at a good race, you don't sit there and go, oh my God, that race was amazing because there was 20 million overtakes. You look at a race because there was an amazing battle. He says, if you think of Imola 2005, I think it was, with Alonso and Schumacher. He said, no one overtook during any of that. He said, but everyone was on the edge of their sheets. It could be on the edge of that. Edge of their seats. And how amazing was it that you had two guys in a position where the cars enabled them and the track was in a position where you could actually battle effectively. And that's worth more, that one battle, than 10 overtakes that are just a bit flimsy. And I was like, yes, Ross. So, yeah.
Yes, Ross, yes.
I salute you, sir.
There's a T-shirt in there somewhere. What are you doing on the old Strataguru? Because it's wet all the way through, and as far as I can tell, there is no benefit to stopping twice. But it's still an option.
Yeah, it tells me that it's going to take 9 seconds longer to stop twice. So why would I bother? I'm all right. I'm going to stop once.
I'm good, thanks, Jeff. Cheers, but no.
Cheers, Chip.
I'm going to put a little bit more fuel in the car.
Ooh.
Reason being that the extra weight seems to help. Because the car is very squidgy, squirmy, and it might help me bog down and get some grip in the rain. Plus it means I can run a higher engine mode, because wear is irrelevant, even though it's in the game and we're playing for a full season, but they've disabled that mechanic.
Yep.
So, curses.
Wonderful. So I'm not going to go on for too much more extra fuel, because I find that if I go, I think it's a psychological thing, if I go mixed fuel 1, sometimes in intermediates and slippy conditions, I seem to not put the power down so heavy, and therefore I don't spin as much. But I don't know if that's true. I've just decided that it's true, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but that's like 99% of truth, isn't it?
Yeah,
If you believe something will happen, it will happen. That's how it works.
just ask Milana.
Exactly. So that does segue to some extent into a discussion about progress and improvement and so on that Gunter Steiner has been having with the press. And there have been like two contradictory statements from him in 2 days, which we were reading before we went live.
Yes.
The
Could
first
you,
one
could you
was
before you say what they are, there was one word that you used to describe those. Would you like to repeat it out on air for everyone?
delusional. Was that the right word?
Yep. Made
Yeah,
me chuckle.
delusional. Because we were reading this together before we went live, and it's the ravings of a madman. Like, I don't know what sport he was watching, but he wasn't watching his cars. Because he says in his first statement, well, I think Haas has proven this year that your second season doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be like a downward spiral where you go backwards. And I was thinking, what were you watching? You finished the season behind the Saubers. What are you talking about? And then today, his statement has been, well, it was a roller coaster season. We had problems with consistency, and I think we changed focus to 2018 too early. Which kind of struck me as a humble brag, saying, well, 2018's car is going to be badass, but they said that about 2017's, and it really wasn't. And it just seems like it's just become characteristic of that team. They're just confused. The brakes don't work. They can't get the aero right. They spin on outlaps, and what was the other failure they kept having? They kept having brake failures, and then there was another failure that they kept having.
Like wheel nuts and things.
Yes, something like that. I forget it now, but and they just make these statements that have no bearing on reality. Like, I don't know by what measure you could say that this season wasn't a difficult year for Haas. That they had occasional like glimpses. They had a few double points finishes, but they finished in the exact same place in the constructors, I believe.
Yep.
And that's only because the teams behind them were fucking awful. And I don't see how he could be feeling positive about the year, nor do I understand how he could be feeling particularly positive going into next year.
No.
I mean, for me, the really interesting thing about it all was that he was saying all this stuff. Oh no! Oh, fucking hell!
Where did you?
And now someone's taken my wing off.
Oh, God.
Thanks, Merrickson, you dick.
We've been nice to you all year, Merrickson. Do you need to restart?
No, it's okay. It's just a racing incident. It was Hamilton that nudged me.
Yeah, I saw. You it came across your front, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that could have been me just taking a bad line, to be fair, but still, it doesn't. It feels like a massive injustice has occurred.
Sorry, I'll take it out.
Yeah, just knock him off for me, would you, pal? I'd consider that a great personal favour.
Really? Give him the old
Now,
arse.
I don't want to cover the Haas thing too much because we've flogged it to death, and everyone knows what our opinion is about the problems that team has that are inherent to the way it's structured. But it just struck me as odd, and it wasn't the only delusional statement we've had in the news, because Lance Stroll announced that he thinks his drives have vindicated him and silenced his critics. And again, I'm thinking, are you talking about your Gran Turismo record? Because are you sure as shit can't be talking about your Formula One record? And that's from someone who quite likes you.
Yeah.
Like, never mind silencing your critics, you haven't silenced your fans.
Exactly. My problem with Lance Stroll is he he's doing what we accused Vettel of doing for many a year, where if you're out front and you're on your own, it's all okay. But as soon as you're out in traffic or whatever, then you just drive like a moose. And for me, he was, what was it, 8 tenths of a second on average slower than Massa in qualifying. What?
Yeah.
That's unforgivable. I think if that is whoever is your teammate for next year, that needs to be better. And he drove to me like someone who didn't understand tyre wear, tyre life. And like Brendan Hartley took 2 races to get up to speed with that, and you're still plodding around not knowing what's going on after 21. Or 20, sorry.
Yeah, and that's Brendan not as naturally talented as Daniel Kvyat, Hartley.
Yes, exactly. Poor guy.
If only he was as gifted as Daniel Kvyat.
You know, that guy that you dropped to put him in.
Yeah. He must at night go to bed lamenting the fact that he just, if only.
If only I could torpedo naturally.
Exactly. If only I was naturally gifted at hitting Sebastian Vettel twice on the same lap. But alas. Again, though, I feel like we're flogging a dead horse a bit because we've spoken about Stroll already. Last week even we were talking about the fact that he really needs to start delivering. I think he's worth a second shot, but the time to shine is now.
Absolutely, especially when we haven't got a poxy clue who your teammate is going to be. Still at Williams' watch. I feel like when that happens, they could make Peter Jackson do like a trilogy film on it. It's just gone on for so long. But if Sirotkin gets in, I think that could show up Stroll very, very, very quickly.
Well, the other problem there, of course, is that Williams will be burnt down by angry Polish Twitter users. I mean, the factory will be burnt to the ground, so Sirotkin will have to be driving quickly in a pile of ashes. However, I think Sirotkin will prove to be a very dangerous teammate for... oh, wow! Did you just get a message from Jeff saying that we're transitioning to light rain? So technically what he's saying is we would have been much faster if we'd started on full wet tyres.
Oh.
But it would have become a 2-stop race. I'm back up to 7th, and I'm gaining on Ricciardo. Where are you, first?
I'm 3rd at the moment. Hot-tailing Hamilton. Vettel's getting away. I
am losing a lot of time because of my wing problems, though, unfortunately. Thanks, Merrickson.
Okay.
I'm missing the Durs as well because it's really quite hard to overtake here. I didn't realise that it was quite so hard to overtake because in my career mode I qualified really well in the McLaren and then just had a clean race.
Yeah, a lot of these, because it's all sweeping, you don't really get the ability to kind of overlap too much, do you?
No.
The old breakeroo.
I have to say though, some of the defensive driving the AI does is pretty freaking good, actually.
I think so. I know we bitch
Ricciardo...
about...
Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say I know we bitch about it a fair bit, but when you look at this too, like I'm really into Gran Turismo Sport at the moment. Hello, Menno. Welcome for joining. I know we bitch about this quite a lot, but yeah, when you look at GT Sport, all of that is just passive aggressive, and they drive on a rail. They don't really do very much. So yeah, this is grand.
No, it's just that I've noticed Ricciardo moving onto the inside line to cover me into corners and stuff, and it's making his car very, very fat, and it's holding me up. It's allowing the car in front to get away. Next time, Gadget. I finally got past him. Finally. Because the thing is, I'm really good in the wet, particularly in intermediate conditions.
I've never been a good wet driver in these games. This is the best that I've
I'm
done.
like already I'm pulling out a huge gap to him, so it shows that he's been really holding me up. And I've got 7 seconds to Bottas now because I was stuck behind Ricciardo's fat arse. What's your fastest lap thus far? Just so I can compare us on pace.
Just coming over the line now with 1:49.5 is my fastest.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to catch you. But again, I haven't done a lap in clean air yet, but mine's a 1:50.1452. So.
Well, I just done a 1:55. Sorry, 1:50.5, not 1:55. Snail pace. I'm not Carmen Jordering it. Can we also lament next year no Brazilians on the grid?
Yeah, for the first time in an incredible amount of time.
And what I just wanted to shout out on that was it wasn't too long ago, and I'm going to have a meltdown. No, I am right. Do you remember when we were saying this about, oh my god, there's going to be no Italians on the grid, and oh my god, there's going to be no Japanese on the grid? And I just kind of think, it feels really weird. I remember when there was no French drivers on the grid as well. I know things kind of go round in circles, but we were kind of having the prospect that if Hamilton does decide to go off into his Weldo fashion and Instagram and the rap career that we're all can't help but wait for.
Yeah, world dreading, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Looking at me, looking at you. What was I going to say? We need to be thinking about where our next Brits are coming from. And I was just going to say that I wanted to add a new driver onto the list of British talent that we should be looking for.
Oh, please do.
A man called Dan Ticktum.
Got 6 good talents for F1 winning face.
We've got plenty of talents. I agree, Menno. So yeah, Dan Ticktum, he comes from the school of naughty because he was banned from motor racing after he punched someone, I believe.
Russell, Roland, Ticton, Illard.
Oh, okay. There we go. Everyone's talking the same stuff. I do not... Actually, we'll go through those names in turn, if we don't mind. I don't know if you could hear that.
I didn't, actually. Could you lay them on me?
Yeah, so Dan Ticktum is... he just recently won the Macau thing, where everyone crashed out at the final corner, and then he came through to take the win. But he joined mid-season in FIA Formula 3, and was immediately battling around for podiums and wins and stuff. And I hadn't heard of him pre all of this, but I've then now seen him in quite a few different Formula all at once, and he's looking really, really good. So we have a new one to join our collection of drivers, which are, and I shall read them out as we go down the straight that Menno has kindly put in. So we've got Lando Norris, George Russell, who done his Force India FP outing, Jack Aitken. Oh shit, that's my front wing. That's alright, it's only yellow. But Jack Aitken, I thought he drove with a Thai license, so I don't know if he's considered British, like fully, even though he is. And then we also have Nick Rowland, not Nick Rowland.
Not Nick Rowland we know, but a different one. I saw the name in the paper, and it did ding a bell, and I was like, surely not, but no, it wasn't.
That would be amazing. And Menno's also put onto the list Callum Ilott, but Callum Ilott crashes way too much and doesn't seem to learn. So I'm not going to include him in that as my little British collection.
Albon has an English license.
Alexander Albon, sorry.
Face with stuck out tongue.
Thank you, Menno. That is true. Alexander Albon is a Thai driver, but he is anything but Thai.
out of all of those, I mean, Lando Norris, I'm super excited for, but I just wanted to give a shout out to George Russell, who a lot of people on my Twitter have met recently, and every single one says that he is a delight.
Oh, nice.
Apparently, he is absolutely lovely. He is the new Felipe Massa. He is the new Jenson Button.
Oh, superb.
And that actually makes me happy as well, because I think the sport needs guys like that, like ambassadors for the sport who are fast, which he is, and have a good personality to go with it to help promote the sport and be generally likable. So good on him. Most of it came out of the Autosport Awards, where he was happy to pose for pictures with people. He hung out with quite a lot of
There's a big chance Force India seem to like him, and Mercedes likes him, and a good seat at F2 at Art, then you got gold.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually think he'll end up at Force India if one of their drivers moves on. The problem is, at the moment, it seems like Perez is kind of forever trapped there. I mean, there's worse places to be, but still, it does seem to be like the cul-de-sac of his career.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that harks back, I guess, to what you were talking about earlier, where he ends up potentially at Ferrari.
I wish Ferrari would give him a chance. I mean, I don't know. I think we're in for an exciting few years with all this, because we've got this amazing young talent, but we've also got a lot of sort of midfield drivers who've been around for a while who are proven to be good and have just never had a big shot. I don't put Hulkenberg in that group anymore because he's got a works ride with Renault now. But, you know, Ricciardo's contract's going to be up, and we know Raikkonen's probably on his way out, and then we're fairly confident that Bottas is going to be dropped from Mercedes after another year. So, you know, then the rumour is that Ricciardo could end up at Mercedes, but that still opens up a drive at Red Bull. And interestingly, Red Bull claim they've got drivers in mind if Ricciardo leaves. I don't know if that's going to be just signs.
Well, Dan Ticktum has
alluding
just signed to Red Bull.
Yeah, but I guess he'll end up at Toro Rosso first.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I'm going off stratage.
Oh, you've pitted early.
Oh, my tyres are already at 60% wear.
Really?
I've ruined them. I am proper
I'm
sliding.
only at 30, between 29 and 37. That is insane level of wear.
You are clearly the better driver on tyre wear. Yeah, 59. So
Jesus.
my front wing was... Oh, it's not repaired, my front wing. Shit. No, that was the whole point. Ah! Oh, wow. This could be an interesting race. Oh, Christ. I've come out with everyone.
I better make sure that repair front wing is set to yes. Now you've been my guinea pig.
God.
The good news is, though, that you'll gain a lot of time on me in the stop now then, because nose change stops take so much longer.
But I'll have a second stop.
At least his name will be next to Seb at Ferrari, then Ocon to Mercedes, Russell to Force India, and Bott.
Yep, I think Menno was just kind of re-shouting out what you were saying. You were saying Ocon to Mercedes. Bottas, I'm assuming, at the end of that message goes back to Williams, since that seems to be his spiritual home.
I don't know. I think he'll actually be out of the sport.
Do you?
I do, simply because there's too much young talent ready to go. And although there's benefit to Williams taking him back for both parties, I'd be inclined to say that they'll probably have a multi-year deal in place with whoever comes in to replace Massa. And I could see him replacing Stroll if Stroll has another terrible season, but I don't actually think Stroll will have a terrible season. I think a second season is what he needs, and he could actually come good. And at that point, why would you take Bottas back?
Yeah, especially when you think how much money Daddy Strolley brings to the team that has to run like a business to float themselves on a market.
Exactly. I have caught up to the back of Bottas and Raikkonen, to the point where I think they're beginning to hold me up a little. But I can't seem to get round them, and they're following each other so closely.
I am stuck in a massive sandwich of Toro Rossos and Force Indias and a Massa.
Sandwich between two balls. I'm sure I've seen a movie by that title.
Oh, we're going off. We're going off.
We'll get the Williams seat then. What do you hope?
Oh, someone asking us who he thinks will get with a Williams seat. I'm going with Sergei Sorokin. Oh, Massa, you've just
Same.
taken me off.
Sorokin, Kvyat or Palmer XD.
Palmer.
What's happened here? The session no longer exists.
I'm still going. But it says session migrating. Uh-oh.
No. Oh, I was on course for a podium. I could have got a podium. Can I jump back in?
I don't know. Because you're not showing us gone.
I am very much gone.
Let
me see if I can join you from the friends menu.
I've got you. Because even though even when I've come into the options menu, I've just ghosted out and I'm kind of flopping around. This is weird. We can restart. We'd have to restart back in at the beginning of the race, but we can do it.
But don't you have to? You've got to be somewhere. We could do a short classic race, and we can rerun. And we can rerun Britain next time out.
I've got plenty of time to do it.
Well, I tell you what. Why don't you jump out and we'll restart the race?
Yep.
Because I'll load my save, which should take us back to the race.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're both on Sorokin F1, aka Minnow.
Yeah, definitely Sorokin. Particularly because of his Abu Dhabi pace.
Mm-hmm.
He comes with 50 million a season, sure, but he was also faster.
Yeah,
he just was. So, I know people will be upset that it didn't go to Kubica, but that's just the way it fell. And there was his injury was so massive that I can't say honestly I was genuinely surprised that Williams backtracked on it.
A lot of hate towards Russians in F1, but I like to give him a chance.
Fair enough.
Well, he kind of he's been circling around F1 for a while, and I think he's probably overdue for a shot. I think the problem comes down to, though, the fact that both him and Kubica want multi-year deals, and I think it's a bad deal for Williams in both cases.
Yeah.
Given that Stroll is so shaky and consistency is key year on year, without someone like Massa or Bottas there, would you take another unproven driver on a multi-year deal? I don't think you would necessarily. So it's such a hard one to say because out of the available options, I think Sorokin is the one to take. Are you changing your strategy given your new knowledge of your tyres?
Yeah, I'm probably going to two-stop, but purely out of necessity, not necessarily down to pace. Oh dear.
Are you ready, sir?
Yeah. I'm good to go, dude. Take two.
Let's do it. Oh, we've got to do the formation lap again. I was prepared for a racing start there.
Well, hopefully, Spamilton won't chop across your front this time.
It was my own fault because I got a bad start. Speaking of him, though, should we talk about the statement regarding him that was in the press before we went live?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because Toto Wolff, of course, was talking about his contract negotiations, and you and I were talking several races back, actually, that it's very weird because Hamilton normally doesn't like to negotiate his contracts until late in the season, and the season hasn't even begun, and he's already trying to extend his contract. And we were talking at Monaco, it was, where we were saying, is he the best British driver of all time? And I was pointing out there's a good chance he could equal Schumacher just on the years between now and 2021. And that maybe he's going into contract negotiations on that basis.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was that Toto Wolff was saying, well, we want him on a long-term deal, which he described as around $120 million for 3 seasons. But he said specifically that he doesn't want to. He wants to keep his options open for 2019 about whether he's a racing driver or a fashion entrepreneur. Like, what? And then I said to you, this is exactly why he's been dressing so weirdly at all these award ceremonies.
Yep.
He's probably designed that stuff himself. He's obviously, maybe he's been listening to the podcast and he realizes that his rap album is going to be horse shit. So he's gone into something else. I don't know, it's kind of cool he's got all these wide and varied interests, but really though.
I wonder if you'll ever try
really?
and replicate Robert Dornbos and go into the porn sex toy industry.
Is that what Dornbos did? That's amazing.
Yeah, Robert Dornbos went into dildos. Dornbos is dildos. I'm sure it was Robert Dornbos.
That's fantastic. That's the best news I've ever heard.
You told me.
Did I?
Yeah.
Well, I forgot about it, and it's brand new to me again.
Yeah. Oh, it's the gift that keeps giving.
Which is probably the tagline on this product.
I wonder if it's got like a proper V8 engine motor. Yeah. No,
In Jaguar colours.
Amazing. Red Bull bags. Right, let's get this. I'll be quiet off the line.
Okay, better start this time out. Hamilton's still going to get in the way of me, I think, but...
So I'm not going for you at all. I am skiddy as hell. Oh, nice.
It was a bit cheeky, but I pulled it off.
It's alright, I'm going to be triple cheeks.
3 horse cheeks.
That's I don't know what kind of magical beast we are.
I don't think I've got the pace to match Vettel, though, unfortunately. So, this brings us now to what could ostensibly be a large amount of dead air, because Formula One, very selfishly, has no real news going on. So, it occurred to me that we could do our usual default, which is get a little bit nostalgic. Or we could also open the floor to some Q&A, and I think we should combine the two. So if you've got any questions, please do throw them our way. Otherwise, let's get our nostalgia on. And what I want to talk to you about, actually, is the 2000s, which is a period that we don't normally talk about very often.
Yeah, because we normally
if you recall,
one beyond, don't we?
Yeah, but if you recall, there was a lot of very... Oh, no! There was a lot of very unusual rule changes that decade that required a lot of reversals, and I think it's high time for a bit of a post-mortem to see if we can learn anything. And the first thing I want to put to you is that I actually I mean, it's not my preferred method of doing it, but I did actually quite like the one lap reverse order qualifying.
Yeah.
So if you recall, if you won the last race, you were the last person to qualify, and you got one lap only, one flying lap to qualify. And I think the reason I liked it so much is that you genuinely got to see what each driver was capable of. It's how actually I developed a little bit of a fondness for Giorgio Pantano, who apparently Adrian Newey in his book says a number of drivers rated very, very highly indeed, but his 1 year in a Jordan didn't really yield anything.
No.
But I do remember him throwing that car around a little bit, and also what was the name of that Minardi driver that had a really long, ridiculous name?
Friesacker?
Yeah, Patrick Friesacker. I saw him pull out some very interesting, very leery laps in that Minardi that I think made for some very watchable television. And if you think about all of the formats of qualifying, you really don't see a lot of the midfield and junior drivers. And I know, like, these days we have much better coverage during the race, and the camera's a lot happier to jump down the field when there's something interesting going on. But still, I think you do miss out on a lot of stuff, which, as we saw this weekend, Pascal Wehrlein was lamenting, claiming that nobody saw his best drives because he was in a Sauber. We're not going to touch on that simply because you didn't wipe the floor with the Merrickson, so your opinion is invalid. But, I mean, I've personally always been a fan of the open 1 hour. 12 laps, 1 hour, have at it. That's always been my favourite because it's got so much tactical appeal, but we know the FIA basically got rid of that because in certain races it resulted in 45 minutes of nothing happening and Murray Walker going slowly insane.
Which was so relative comedy gold and TV gold sometimes anyway, as you divulge some of his deep, dark secrets of what he thought about people without him noticing that he'd done that at the same time. The diminutive little Japanese boy, Ukyo. All right.
I think it was 1990 where in qualifying there was like a lot of dead air, and he referred to like the previous day's qualifying with Alan Prost and said it was a good job by the frog. Murray.
Oh my god.
No.
Oh, Grandpa.
Oh, God bless him, eh?
Oh dear, still kicking.
But you know, while you had the sort of tactical freedom of the 1 hour 12 lap formula, and I was wrong, by the way, I am faster than Vettel, considerably so, but I'm too scared to try and get past him. I do think there's merit in the one lap hot lap format. What's your take?
I'm seeing what's happening with you first. That's looking juicier than Christmas dinner.
He's driving into me like consistently. He's just turning into me all the way through that corner.
I can see it. Well done, mate. Well done.
Thank you. It was a bit hairy. It was a bit of brown trousers time, but we got through.
So for me, I did love. See, the worst thing was when they tried that horrible elimination thing. That was.
Yeah, I think hands down everyone would agree that is the single worst qualifying method that F1 has ever dabbled with.
I would have liked to have seen them because I too enjoyed the 1 hour thing. I did enjoy the 1 lap qualifying. I did not enjoy the aggregate where I think it's 2005 where they started sticking things together because one was with fuel, one was without fuel, and I was like, now this is just a hybrid of trying to please everyone and no one's actually happy. I didn't like that very much.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on that. What do you think of the multi-qualifying sessions though, like qualifying on Friday, qualifying on Saturday, and taking your best time from either day?
That I didn't mind that so much, but then if you had like dry Friday, wet Saturday, again,
then Saturday's not worth watching.
Yeah,
I agree.
It was prime for Murrayisms, and that was it. And then and no one would really go out either, which would then be the problem because there's just no incentive to. So that's why I can kind of see why when they were doing like the one lap stuff and thinking about sticking times together and so on and so forth. So I can see the logic there. I think for me, one of the things that I'd like to have seen with the 1 hour stuff is, excuse me, I was about to burp then. Making everyone do 1 lap every 15 minutes, and then add them all together.
I kind of like that actually, as long as we could bring back qualifying tyres and qualifying engines.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because it's got some of the benefits of the hot lap thing. Because you could do 1 lap every 15 minutes and have, so many drivers on track at once. Like the 1 lap thing was. So as you were doing your hot lap, as you crossed the line, the other car would come out behind you.
Yeah.
And run in the clean air and then start his hot lap as you come in, and it was kind of like a leapfrog thing. I think there is a way to be able to do that, to have a few cars on track at once, but evenly separated.
Yes.
And give them 1 lap every 15 minutes, and then you won't see 100% of laps by each driver, but you should still see a good spread of cars up and down the grid, and you'll see them in, a quali trim, which you just don't have these days. You don't have quali trim anymore because you qualify in race trim because it's stupid not to. Mm-hmm. And I think I do miss that. I mean, I miss the stuff like, do you remember the late 80s with the Benetton with the BMW Megatron engine, over 1,000 brake horsepower, and you could only use it in qualifying. And then Goodyear had it was Pirelli they were on, who had some insane quali tyres. I think that's brilliant, but of course then you're putting the costs up of the sport. And, you're in traffic, aren't you, my friend? I mean, like Vettel's holding you up. You on my mini map, you look faster than him.
I think it's just I had 1 lap where it all came together, and I'm now on the back of him. But I don't feel like I'm consistently much faster. I think I know that I'm committed to a 2-stop, so I need to be able to get past, and then get a lap not a lap in front. But you know what I mean?
Yeah. How is your tyre wear though? Because you could always go to a 1-stop if you're able to hold on to your tyres.
I think this is slightly better because I've not fucked my front wing, but I'm still sliding around like, I don't know, like I've got anal leakage.
Yeah.
35% front
it is on the advisory. What's your front left? Sorry.
35 at the minute.
Oh wow, yeah, you are hard on your tyres. 27. That is one of the little things that bring me joy about doing this podcast, is occasionally seeing where you and I really differ. Because you do tend to be faster, but you're also a lot harder on fuel and tyres generally. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting when we get into a strategic race. I really enjoyed the last race actually, because you and I were so closely matched all the way through, but then something went wrong, didn't it? Because in the end we were separated by quite a few positions, but not on merit, by circumstance. Like you'd had an accident or something.
No, I had to go. Didn't I have to go 1 step harder on tyres? Didn't I?
That was it. It was a tyre strategy problem, because I'd put too many laps on my tyres in Q2, but it actually worked to my advantage. Yeah. Because weather changed or something. I forget. It was only 2 weeks ago. I'm getting old.
No. So I thought it was stops. So I tried to go for an extra stop on something, and you was able to make the tyres last, and you didn't lose out. Whereas I went for a stop heavier. I went for a tyre wear compound lighter, but for an extra stop, and you made the work better with the slower time. All good.
Oh, good job, me. Doesn't sound like me, but
Well
good
done,
job.
you.
Yeah. Now, the other things that were brought in, and a lot of this came back to me because I was reading the Adrian Newey book. And
right.
I'll be honest with you, I was quite naive because I didn't realise the Leighton House cars he designed were quite so beastly.
Beastly as in terrible.
No, I mean, like, competitive.
Yeah. Oh, battle.
Has he hit you as well? He's an
To be
arsehole.
fair, I was trying to recover from a half spin. Oh, now how much was it hit me? Oh, he's still hitting me. Oh, this is all going horribly wrong.
That's the only thing that really does annoy me about this game, is that sometimes you'll be in front going into a corner and they'll turn in on you and they'll just keep turning and turning and turning into you. So
Yeah,
like your cars are physically touching and they don't back out of it.
Yeah. Okay, we're back up to third. Yeah, because Leighton House in like 19... Was it Gugelmin
It was
or
88
Capelli?
or 89
Yeah.
that he did his first car from scratch, and I didn't know that he'd pioneered quite a few things that no other teams were doing with that car.
Oh, okay.
And what he says in the book is, if you look really carefully, you can see that when I moved to Williams, the Williams cars were an evolution of the Leighton House cars. And I think it was the 89 Leighton House where he basically took a mold of the driver's body, essentially, and like made the nose section almost V-shaped to package it as tightly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And he's quite, open about all these innovations he came up with, and he says what you'll notice is that, to him, it sounds like it's the car he's possibly the most proud of. That the other bigger teams started to copy it by the next season, like the stuff he'd done, like raising the nose. I know it was Harvey Postlethwaite that really pioneered the anhedral nose, but the high nose was Newey. And
Harvey Postlethwaite. Let's give
what a badass.
Let's tip our hat to him for a second.
He's one of my... I think he could arguably be my all-time favourite designer, actually, Harvey Postlethwaite, just because even though he didn't have like huge runaway success, a lot of what he came up with became like the de facto standard, and it's just he always came up with stuff at teams that didn't have the budget or the engine to get the most out of them. John Barnard as well, I rate very, very highly.
Yeah.
Robin Hurd too, he was something of a genius. But anyway, we're getting off topic.
Yeah, sorry.
But he was talking about all these regulation changes in the mid 2000s, and it's very interesting to hear all these because at the time, right, you don't know this stuff. This is what we were talking about last time out, where teams make tech advances, but they're not really comprehensively listed in the broadcast, so you don't know who's brought what and what it means, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And like his last years at McLaren, there was a lot of like stuff going on with the car that was a little bit touch and go. Also, his first years at McLaren, like I didn't realise he had a car that essentially had four-wheel steering. It didn't, but it mimicked four-wheel steering by braking the inside wheels at a different level to the outside wheels to aid with turning, the same way a tank works.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about this system and that he didn't like it was on the borderline of legality, but he felt he'd found the loophole. And actually, him talking about Ferrari during his entire career, I can tell why he's never worked at Ferrari, because he seems to hate them. And he was saying that all through the 90s, every team was pretty much united in hating Ferrari, and the sort of the default setting was, if you came up with an innovation, Ferrari would try and copy it, and if they couldn't make it work, that's when they'd complain about it. But yeah, all the politics and everything, it's all fascinating. And getting back onto the original point, I just didn't know that the Leighton House was such a good car. And it was arguably the best car of the the naturally aspirated F1 cars. They even got on the podium. They got a second place finish.
Yeah, Paul Ricard.
The issue they had was that they couldn't get the aerodynamics quite correct because they were using a smaller scale model, and the problem didn't develop until they started running it on a larger scale model. And then there was a problem with the wind tunnel, that apparently the bottom of the wind tunnel had been made out of wood, and it had deformed because of moisture, and so the surface was concave rather than flat.
Oh, wow.
And so it was messing up all their aero simulations, and when the car was out on track, the diffuser was stalling. And once they fixed that problem, the car was an absolute animal. But because you had a two-tier Formula One in those days, because you had turbos and naturally aspirated,
Yep.
it had to make do with being the best naturally aspirated car, but it was not the outright best car. So, yeah, very, very interesting. And I really would recommend that book to absolutely everybody. I think it's an excellent read.
Awesome.
A particular highlight for me was him talking about, in the first chapter, actually, he has an anecdote about how his mum and dad are quite odd characters. So his dad, he thinks he got a lot of his engineering quirkiness from, and his ability to come up with odd solutions to problems. And he was talking about how his dad used to stain fence posts for the garden. And he said, well, most people would just accept that you have to paint 2 or 3 coats of creosote onto your fence posts, right? So it's quite a lengthy job. But he said what his dad did was get a load of paint tins, cut the bottom out of 8 of them, weld them all together into a big tower, fill them with creosote, and then just dunk the fence posts into them and leave them to soak, so he didn't have to paint them more than once. Which that really is a sort of Mad Hatter solution. But bang on. And his mum, he gets sort of his rebelliousness and competitiveness from.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that his mum had a secret drinking problem, not proper alcoholism, but she was drinking a lot more than people would find seemly in those days.
Right.
And she was always trying to hide it, and she had a thing for gin martinis. And he said she would have got away with it, but they had a parrot. And after a while, the parrot would make the noise of the bottle opening and the glug 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 of the glass being filled, and then in his mum's voice would say, "Ah, that's better," and he would sit there doing it. And I thought that was a fucking brilliant story, that his mum's drinking problem was outed by the parrot. So
that's super
nice. And I found out his family is wealthy because of fasteners. They have a patent on certain fasteners and clasps and things like that used in clothing production and stuff. And you can actually, if you go on Amazon or whatever, if you search Nui clips, they were invented by his great-grandfather or his grandfather or something. And there's a company called Nui Fasteners, and he's from the same family,
cool.
which I didn't know about. And there's lots of these very cool anecdotes. He was talking about working with Nigel Mansell and all the mind games that Nigel Mansell would play, particularly when he was teammates with Riccardo Patrese. And he said Patrese was a much more consummate professional driver and took fitness way more seriously than Nigel, and Nigel was very working class common.
Yeah.
And he said the best demonstration of this would be when they were in a restaurant in the south of France after Monaco, and the waiter brought him some fish, I don't know, sole or something, and he asked for tomato ketchup, and the waiter went, "Oh, you're very droll, sir. That's very funny." And Nigel said, "Oh, thank you very much, but still, where's the ketchup?" And apparently, the waiter lost his shit about having to bring ketchup. Anyway, the key story was that the drivers used to be, well, they still are, they're weighed. And Patrese had been working really hard in the gym, and he wanted to come in as like the number one driver. And as you saw from the Williams film, he considered himself the number one driver. And when it didn't quite happen, he was doing everything he could to sort of make himself the obvious choice for number one driver.
Yeah.
And he was always commenting that Nigel would always eat like sausages and bacon and burgers and stuff. So when the weigh-in came, the whole day before, Nigel didn't eat or drink anything. He pulled the lining out of his helmet, and he didn't wear any underwear and things like that. And then when the weigh-in happened, he came in as underweight compared to Patrese, and it really messed with Patrese's head. He also did other stuff, like I believe at Belgium, he was a little bit faster through a corner complex, and they'd have the race engineer debriefings. And Newey reveals in his book actually that he and Mansell used to have like the standard race debriefing, and then they would have a one-on-one real debriefing where Nigel would tell him the truth. So he would lie in the debriefings, and what he would say was, well, I'm faster through the corners because, like, obviously the wheel kicks and it takes you offline. So because it's quite tight in the cockpit, I jam my hand between the steering wheel and the side of the chassis, and that stops the wheel kicking, so I stay online and I'm faster. And so Patrese hears this in the meeting and, does it himself. And he comes back in after his qualifying lap with his hands bleeding through his gloves because the wheel still kicks, right? And it just really hurts your hand. And Nigel had just been fucking with him, which I thought was also quite good. And the other thing is on the active suspension car, when he was coming back into the pits, Nigel would twist and turn all the dials on the active suspension setting so that when he'd been faster, Patrese's race engineer would come and look at his settings, replicate them on Patrese's car, and not be able to make the car go any faster. Although apparently this backfired once because Nigel forgot that he'd reset all the dials to like random numbers, went out in the car and crashed. So, nice lap, my friend. That was a fast one as well. Like, you're like 6/10 up on my best lap so far. That was a stormer.
It's going well, but the two stopping is going to really, really ruin it. I think I'll be sick. That's really, really interesting though, because like those kind of insights, especially when you think of like Mansell and Patrese, like 1992, the mass gulf that there was between them. I kind of make me now think, well, what the bloody hell was poor Patrese driving? All of that, and actually just like how much you could get away with things like that back in those days, because like in a world where now you've got like McLaren have got like the data factory at the place, and a data factory watching a data factory back in England, and then there's probably, I don't know, Ron Dennis up on the moon going
yeah,
like
weather's looking good, boys.
Yeah, you couldn't get away with that now.
Well, he says a lot of that in his book, and I think you'd enjoy his insights on that actually, because he says a lot like that. That there's a lot of stuff now that just wouldn't happen anymore because you've got access to much higher quality data and stuff, and he thinks it takes like the sport loses some of it. And he also spends a lot of time railing against the FIA closing loopholes and the ever more restrictive regulations that made him really annoyed and took his passion away. What is interesting is that he rates Red Bull as his favourite team to work at. He doesn't say it explicitly, but you get it through his words that out of all the teams he's worked at, Red Bull has been the one he's felt most supported and comfortable in, and free to do his own things. And the stories about him changing teams are actually really interesting, because I always wondered why he left Williams.
Yeah.
And the reason, indirectly, is because of them firing Damon Hill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right. The story is that he really liked Nigel. Like, he concurs with everyone who says, well, Nigel's a bit of an arse, right? But, like, to work alongside in a professional capacity, like, as a race driver providing feedback on your design, he really rated working with Nigel because his feedback was good. And he would go out and push to the limit whereas Patrese would creep round, and so would Prost,
Uh-huh.
and gradually build up, and it made it really hard to evaluate setup changes and stuff, whereas Nigel would be a much stronger reflection of what the car was actually capable of. And he was saying that he was surprised when Nigel was replaced, and everyone was, right, that Williams screwed Nigel a little bit. And he said what actually happened is that Frank and Patrick Head used to have meetings at lunch where they made all the decisions in private behind closed doors about the team, and they decided to drop Nigel a year before they did, because they always seemed to plan way in advance. Anyway, this really upset Adrian, and when Adrian knew he was up for renewal, he'd been offered jobs elsewhere, and Williams managed to keep hold of him by saying, well, okay, we'll match the money you offered elsewhere, but also he wanted creative control, basically, so he wanted to be part of that big two group. So he was saying, any decisions you make regarding driver hires and stuff, I want it written into my contract that I have a say and a veto.
Right.
And they said, yeah, sure, no problem, we'll put that in. And apparently they decided at the end of 1995 to fire Damon Hill because his 95 season they felt was really poor.
Okay.
And they wanted to get Frentzen in the car. And apparently Frank Williams had a huge boner for Frentzen.
Yes.
And
Which,
they didn't...
judging from the 95 season, he was meteoric there, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, to be fair. I mean, I could understand it. But anyway, they made this decision without not just telling Newey at the time they'd made the decision, but all through the 1996 season until the news broke at the end of the season. And at the time it was just rumours, and he talks about being on a plane sat next to Patrick Head, and he said, oh, what about these rumours about Damon? And he said, yeah, it's sad business, that, isn't it? But basically all but confirming that it was true. And Newey was furious that this decision had been, first of all, taken without him, but also he rated Damon as one of the best drivers he'd ever worked alongside. And says, his legacy is dangerously underappreciated, which you and I said a few weeks back as well. And he said it's really hard to quantify exactly how good he is, because a lot of the time as a viewer you don't understand the value of his feedback, or how impressive his laps in testing and qualifying and practice actually are in real terms, when you've got all the data and numbers about the car. And he said, so no matter, and proof was in the pudding, right, no matter how good Damon's 1996 season ultimately was, he was fired regardless. So at that point he decided to go to McLaren, and his move to McLaren is genuinely hilarious for me, because he talks about arriving at McLaren, and this was just before they opened the technology centre, but obviously eventually they did. And he said that grey is Ron Dennis's favourite colour. And it's not just that West influenced the colour of the livery. Big Ron wanted a grey car, and grey is his absolute favourite colour. And he said, aside from at the engineering bays at McLaren, which we know are sterilised surgeon's table white, all the offices are grey. And when he first got to McLaren, he said, it's hard to describe, right? But as a designer, it was really hard to be creative surrounded by grey.
Oh yeah.
And I had some budget, and I spoke to the office manager and said, look, when we go to the flyaway race, while you were away, could you redecorate my office? And he'd asked for tan leather chairs and eggshell blue walls and a bit of colour and stuff. And another thing as well, he always asks for the office overlooking the car park for some reason. He just said that I just find it helps to watch people coming and going and stuff. And anyway, they go away for the flyaway race, and when they next come back to the technology centre, the job's done, and the office has been redecorated, and it's all very cool and everything, and he's really happy with it. Ron doesn't know about it. He comes to see Adrian to talk about, upgrades for the car or whatever. And gets to the door, does not take a step in, goes red, then goes purple, and then silently turns on his heel and walks away. And apparently, like, he was absolutely furious, but he rated Adrian so highly, and he was new to the team, that he didn't want to blow his top at him in case, like, the rift, like, basically knew he'd leave the team.
Yeah.
And he said, I never painted my office back to grey, even though I knew it drove him crazy. And it's such a great story.
I gotta get this.
But for me, like, the really cool thing about that book is he talks about the innovations he made and how he made them, like the surprising things. He talks about the cost it had on his relationships and his marriages, and his relationships with his kids. He talks in great detail about his guilt over Ayrton Senna's death, and he talks in as much detail as presumably he can for legal reasons about the trial. And, you know, in particular, he feels very guilty about, basically, they very tightly packaged the car, as they always do.
Yeah.
And Ayrton had some requirements about where the steering wheel was. So they decided, well, okay, we'll try and accommodate him and make sure that he's comfortable and happy. But in doing so, oh, Jesus, Van Dorn, he's just taken half my wing off by moving back onto the racing line under blue flag conditions.
Wanker.
But anyway, to basically make the modification for Ayrton, because the chassis was so tight around the wheel, they had to like narrow something. So they narrowed the wheel a little bit, and to accommodate it, they had to narrow a portion of the steering rod that connects the wheel through the dashboard to the axle. And they basically shaved, you know, a few fractions of a millimeter off or whatever. And he said at the time at Williams, they didn't have like the engineering structure that subsequently would come in at McLaren, and they didn't have basically everything went through Patrick or him. There was no like under managers, and there was no one second checking stuff. And so if he had a mistake in his drawings, it would be sort of unquestioningly replicated, and then it would be a problem and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, they never sent this off to a structural engineer who would have told them that this like really this weakens the steering rod unacceptably. And it was never conclusively decided whether the steering rod actually caused the accident or whether it was just one failure among many or whatever, but he feels very guilty because he made this modification without really thinking about the consequences of doing it. And then at some point during the accident, like before the major impact, but like during the crash process, the sensors seem to indicate that steering input stopped, and it's unclear whether the steering rod had broken at that time or not. But he feels like the car should never have been allowed out with that modification on it, and he feels just incredible guilt for it even through to this day. And it goes to show actually like the burden that is on these guys actually, that you don't think about so much, because as we've talked about, F1 is so much safer these days. And he says it's the one form of interference from the FIA that he does approve of, like on safety grounds, because if you have to make a decision between safety and performance, he doesn't think the designer should be the one making that decision about where the line is, because you'll always be tempted to prioritize performance over safety.
Oh yeah.
It's a great book. It's called How to Build a Car. Everyone should go out and get it. It's very reasonably priced, and it's incredibly well written. It goes through. It's very interesting because it ties cars to times in his life. So he talks about life inside the team at that time. He talks about his personal life at the time during that season, and he also talks about the design process of each car and like these particular innovations that made that car good or bad. He's not ashamed to talk about where he's failed and made mistakes, and where the car has been a dog because he's been stupid. I'm surprised about how many mistakes he's made in his career, because I've always found him I've always had the impression that he was a guy who pretty much hit it every time.
Yeah.
He describes it very much as being, well, when I have a lucky break, it's really lucky, but when I'm in the doldrums, it's really hard to get out. I find it very interesting that the two teams that most defined his career, Williams and McLaren, he left under clouds so black that he can never go back. He talks about Martin Whitmarsh at McLaren in the same terms you and I have previously, although it was actually falling out with Big Ron massively that really caused the problem.
Okay.
He talks about why he didn't go to Jaguar when they tried to get him.
Right.
He talks about wanting desperately to work for Lotus but picking March because he felt like he could learn more there. He seems very pragmatic in his decisions, and I didn't realise he was so successful in IndyCar.
Yeah, I didn't know about this until I'd seen an interview with him where he was talking about doing something not for Penske but for the Andretti people.
Yes, he did. Yeah, I didn't realise. It sounds like at the time IndyCar was actually a lot more interesting than I consider it today. Maybe it's just the way his writing style conveys what was going on at the time, but it was fascinating really that he got into Formula One and then basically got kicked out of it through circumstance, and then he came back when March re-entered Formula One as Leighton House, and he was very reluctant to do it in one sense because the money in IndyCar was a lot better at the time. But yeah, fascinating book, very, very worthy of a good old read. Next on my list is Jenson Button's autobiography.
So I've just ordered that as part of my Christmas treats to myself. So have you already got it? Or?
No, I haven't. I have to pick up a copy, but it is on my list. I did recently read an interview with JB, though, where he was talking about... And I'm sorry to everyone who comes here for F1 news and everything, but there just hasn't been any news.
No, but this is just as vital. I find this really interesting, actually, so thank you.
I read an interview last week with Jenson Button, actually, where he set the record straight about his book, saying that he doesn't like how the press have said that he described Lewis as weird. He said Lewis isn't weird, but some of the stuff he does as a teammate is weird. And he talks about, what's in the book, about the different stages of his career and everything. I'm quite interested about his Williams and Benetton years in particular. Obviously, his relationship with his father plays a big role, so I'm keen to read about that. Mm-hmm. Although I think that's been covered so much that we're probably familiar with a lot of the details. Jeff's suggesting that it might dry out before the end of the race, but I think that's a little optimistic, Jeff, because there's only 3 laps to go, really.
I think same with you with Jenson. I'm quite interested to hear about how he was with when he got the call to come to Williams, because apparently in an interview that I've seen with him, originally when Frank Williams rung him up, he said he wasn't ready. Because he was being honest, and then he phoned up his dad or something, or his manager, and I was like, "What did you just say?" And then he phoned back because he was in the pub, and apparently he thought it was a mate taking the piss, and he was like, "Yeah, whatever, Frank." Didn't really think much of it, and then was like, "Nope, that was definitely Frank." So I hope that is true, and I hope to find out more of that in the book.
That is a fantastic little story. No, I'm interested in his Benetton years because they sound really, really rough, actually.
Well, yeah, because Fisichella used to, and Trulli used to give him a good run for his money, especially 2001 at the back of the field, because he wasn't doing a great time that year, was he? 2001, I thought he was quite poor.
No, but the car was also shite, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah,
it
the car was
arguably one of the worst cars on the grid.
Oh, yeah.
But he was saying that it was a lot harder to work for Flavio Briatore and Benetton than it was to work for Williams. And he said, like, you get this reputation with Patrick Head being like a proper hard ass. And, he can be. But he said, honestly, they were a lot more understanding of me in my season there than the support I ever got at Benetton. which I found a little surprising. I mean, not that I don't consider both to be sort of cutthroat environments, but Patrick Head, I'm surprised to hear him described as being patient, because in Newey's book as well, he talks about Patrick Head being he's the great grandson or whatever of some admiral, right, who fought at Trafalgar.
Yeah.
And he said you can tell it's just one of those families. You can tell he's from a military family, and he sort of he does strut around like an admiral on the quarterdeck, and he bellows. He said like his voice just carries. He's got they call it the boom. Like when you go into his office for telling off, you're being boomed at.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm also keen to get Jensen's view on all that. I've also got Mark Webber's autobiography on audiobook that I want to get a good listen to.
Is it him talking?
I haven't started that yet. No, but it's some Australian journalist, I think.
Okay.
So it is in an Aussie twang. But...
Good. That is the only way how I'd want to listen to that audiobook is with like proper for me and all of that. Yeah, it's got to happen.
And also, when you read these books, like I was saying, you get a lot of insight on stuff, because what I noticed with Newey's book is you realise that you watched races not knowing what was going on behind the scenes, like the modifications they made that they weren't sure they'd get away with, like the problems they were having with the car, or like the interpersonal relationship problems. Like, I didn't realise how sour the relationship at McLaren was at the end of his tenure. And I don't recall like the press or F1 coverage really talking about it. And I didn't realise how acrimonious the final move was as well. Like, I didn't realise Ron Dennis had chewed him out publicly at an awards ceremony, like while he's up on the podium. He said like Adrian only wants to go where the money is, and he doesn't have any ambition and stuff like that in front of Adrian. And I didn't realise like how good his relationship with Christian Horner is, and how Horner actually came to his defence and stuff. It's fascinating stuff. And getting insight into how a team actually functions, and so much of it just doesn't come across day to day. I think because of the secretive nature of Formula One.
Yeah, I think that I think is where F1 can really look at maybe its next level of engagement to try and working out. Because we're all about the drivers and this, that, and the other, but I think that is a highly Americanized, maybe heroistic way of looking at things, and maybe in Europe, I could have it completely wrong, because we do have retro boners for different teams and so on and so forth, and I know that we're a bit more hardcore than most, but there is something around, if F1 is supposed to be this pinnacle of man and machine, and that's why we don't have homogenized units and so on and so forth, then use that to your advantage for F1 in the future. And work with it, because all of that was new to me and fascinating, and I was thoroughly entertained, and I would come complete with more cider for next time for story time with the taco. I'm
glad I was able to enlighten. I think it helps that he's very good at writing. I like the structure of the book, the way it covers all aspects of what was going on at the time. Like, he talks about his personal relationships with quite brutal honesty, actually. And, about his first marriage failing and stuff like that, and how he neglects his partners because he spends so much time travelling, and the punishing work schedule and stuff. Very interesting stuff. And also, like, the politics I always find interesting. Like, still my favourite F1 book, although I think this Newey's book probably replaces it, is Piranha Club, which everyone should read as well, because that's essentially all about the politics of Formula One.
Ooh, now who made that book? Because someone, I think, has just typed in what book? The Piranha Club one.
I can't remember the name of the author, for shame. But yeah, you should find it by title anyway. Newey's book has the same quality in that it's told from people who were there what was going on behind the scenes, and what I find particularly interesting is like the way he felt that Bernie in particular had a a bias towards Benetton and how the FIA was known behind the scenes within all teams as the Ferrari International Aid Association. So, they said it implicitly. And it turns out, he found out in 2006 that Ferrari did actually have a veto on rule changes that no one knew about. And I was reading about that and I thought, shit, how do you and I not know about that? And how is that not come out in the press more clearly? But apparently, yeah, it's true. They had...
Probably because they control that as well.
Yeah. They had total control, apparently, over rule changes and big changes to the formula. But he was talking about, like 94, where Senna in particular was convinced that Benetton were running a de facto traction control system through ECU mapping. And he talks about if you compare Schumacher to Brundle, they were very closely matched, but the following year against Herbert and people like Wendlinger, or was it Leto he teamed with? Leto.
Yeah.
He said, obviously this is pre-Julian Palmer. He said you never saw between teammates a gap of that size. It just didn't happen.
No.
And he said that he's absolutely convinced that Schumacher had a custom ECU. And he talks about the times that Benetton broke the rules, and he was convinced they broke the rules, and were not punished for it. Thank you, mate. Thank you. That was quite a turnaround for me, given my qualifying session was pretty dire.
Oh, you've given yourself facial hair and everything. Love it.
Yeah.
Well done, mate. Well done. Top drive.
Thank you. That was... Yeah, it was good. And is it Hungary next, or Belgium?
Hungary.
It's Belgium, right? Oh, no, it's Hungary. Because Hungary is my best circuit.
Ooh,
and I've won it. I've won it in every career mode that I've run. And my best lap was a Stormer as well there.
Yeah, that was. Fastest lap by Christ, nearly a second over, 7 tenths over. Yeah. 7 tenths over me. That's great.
Boom, mic drop. I didn't realise I was 17 seconds ahead of Vettel as well. Oh, that is a hell of a drive. I'm proud of that.
Well done, mate. Well done.
Thank you, Disconnection.
Yeah,
if it were not for you.
It all works out in the end.
Let's see how that affects the standings. Oh, you and I are next to each other now, except the gap is still pretty heavy.
That's only a win and a second or a third a couple of times one way or another. We're both ahead of Valtteri Bottas. No.
Oh, fired. And we are back into third on the constructors, but we're pretty far behind Mercedes actually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'll close that gap.
No, I think the third Haas would be... I think that would be a miracle anyway, the fact that we've done that.
But that was
also
something...
you're ahead of Red Bull. How's that happened?
Yeah, I'm loving that. That was actually a question I did get on Twitter though that I didn't cover. I got a PM asking if we had any goals for the season, and I was going to say what I want, my target is a top 6 in the drivers by the end of the season, because I think my best drivers finish thus far through all the years we've been doing this is 8th. So if I could break top 6, I'd be happy, and I've just gone from 7th to 5th, so
nice.
that's good. It's going to be tight with Bottas the rest of the year, I think, and I'm not sure I'll catch you because generally you do come home in front, but if I can finish alongside you, I'll be happy, I think.
I think if we're going to have any more tactical tyre wear races, you could be laughing.
Kaboom. Well, thank you, matey, for
thank you
joining me again, and for putting up with me basically ruining Adrian Newey's autobiography for you. But
no. I'm now going to go and place an order with that, because I've got I've got a couple of other books in. They're all in my wish list waiting to go, because I was just making sure that I got paid. So I've got the Jensen Button one. I'd also got the Jeannie Williams book in the basket on Amazon as well. So I may well go and add Adrian Newey now as well, and have a trifecta of Formula One joy.
Excellent. And we will keep everyone updated on Twitter or through PlayStation Network or something about what we'll do in lieu of the holiday celebration we can't have.
Yep.
There still will be a community race, probably with classic cars, but we'll figure out the details. And again, if you are interested in that, you should join the Failcast F1 PlayStation Network group. We'll add you in, and we can use that for organising. And that'll be a chance for us to have a chat with you and exchange ideas and whatnot. Other than that, we'll be, if we're not back before then, we should be back in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. I think that just leaves us all to say... Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, with either next episode or the episode after, will have to be predictions for testing.
Oh,
We'll
God.
be testing in February.
Oh, yeah. Oh, excitement. And also intrepidation. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I have no idea what I'm going to say.
same. And that's why, I think that's why we're excited as well. So, can't wait for that. If you've got any particular thoughts and wishes and whatnot, pop them in the comments, even if the stream is not live. And I think that just leaves us both to wish everyone a pretty amazing kickstart to 2018. I hope you all have a great time.
Yeah, have a fantastic new year.
Boop, boop. So yeah, take care everyone, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks' time. As always, don't forget to follow Definitely Zero over on Twitch and YouTube. And obviously you're here already, so hit that subscribe button. Oh, I want to cry. Okay.
Oh, we sold out.
I know. Dirtbags. Never mind. Take care all. Bye for now.
Yeah, bye for now. Cheers.
We did. We always scraped through. We did well.